Konnichiwa, Mina! And after a bunch of delays working out some new score bugs and some new shit for the standings, here is week 13 of the 2016 PFA season, the week of November 6th through November 7th. But before we look at this week's highlights with the new settings, let's take a look at the standings. Here are the standings after week 12, with Washington leading Boston by a half a game in the Century East. Omaha with the biggest lead of everyone with a 4.5 game lead over Milwaukee in the National Central. Of course, they're going to be on their bye week this week, so they'll stay undefeated for at least another week. Atlanta with a 2-game lead over Birmingham in the National South. Phoenix with a 1-game lead over Portland in the National West. And in the Century Conference, Baltimore has a 2.5 game lead over Pittsburgh in the Century East. Chicago has a 3-game lead over Minneapolis in the Century Central. Dallas has a 2.5 game lead over New Orleans in the Century South. And San Diego has a 1-game lead over San Francisco in the Century West. Now let's take a look at the playoff standings. So first we go to the playoff standings in the National Conference with Omaha and Phoenix still having the byes. And Atlanta will be hosting Los Angeles, and Portland will host Washington. Portland would be at Washington if the season ended today. Now, there's only one team that could be eliminated this week, and that's Indianapolis. If they lose, and Portland and Los Angeles is not playing, so if Indianapolis loses and Portland wins, then they are eliminated. But that's it in the National Conference. Now let's go to the Century Conference. So now we go to the Century Conference, where it's Chicago and Baltimore with the byes. It would be Minneapolis going to Dallas and Pittsburgh going to San Diego if the season ended today. And believe it or not, there's still no team that could be eliminated this week. Even if everything goes wrong for Cincinnati, even at 7-11, they still could mathematically get a spot in the playoffs, which is incredible. But that's it for the playoff standings. Now let's take a look at the schedule for this week. Alright, now here's the schedule for week 13. And it's going to start off with a big one, of course. San Diego going to Atlanta. And then El Paso going to Baltimore. Another big one, Miami going to Birmingham. Cincinnati going to Boston. Oklahoma going to Buffalo. That's going to be big. Philadelphia going to Indianapolis. Kansas City hosting Honolulu. That's big. Washington going to Louisville. Cleveland going to Manhattan. Denver going to Milwaukee. That's going to be really big in the National Centrals. And then the big showdown between the arch rivals, Chicago going to Minneapolis. It's going to be the coldest game so far now with 44 degrees. And a crowd apparently going to be very rambunctious this week to get revenge for that Monday night game in week 5 and to pull within 2 games against Chicago. And then it'll be Columbus going to Pittsburgh, and then the final 1 p.m. game will be Orlando going to San Antonio. And finally, the 4 p.m. games will be Jacksonville going to Portland, Oakland going to Phoenix, and Las Vegas going to San Francisco in a very crucial Century West matchup. And then Sunday night we'll have Dallas going to Houston, and then Monday night we'll have New Orleans going to Tampa. So now let's take a look at the results for Week 13. So let's start with this brand new preview with San Diego Rays going to Atlanta Trojans. A big showdown here. San Diego needs to win to keep up with San Francisco, and Atlanta needs to win to keep up against Birmingham. So let's go take a look at the results. And despite Atlanta being favored to win by 57.7%, San Diego would pull off a 3-point victory in overtime. They pull off to win 17 unanswered points to get the victory, and will put them both at 8-3. And San Diego's Burton Valentine was 25 of 39 for 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. That was a pretty good game for his first time back after a couple weeks. Atlanta's Cody Perry was 20 of 31 for 263 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions, so he had a good game too. But Atlanta's Kenneth Dixon, running back, 23 attempts, 114 yards, but no touchdown. But Atlanta's Joseph Emons, a wide receiver, 4 receptions, 154 yards, and 3 touchdowns. What an incredible game they had. But unfortunately for Atlanta, it just was not enough to beat San Diego. But then we got to the next showdown, El Paso going to Baltimore. El Paso needed a win to keep up in the Century West, but Baltimore needs to win to keep up with that bye against Chicago. But in a stunning upset, El Paso would knock off Baltimore, go up 21-0, and end up winning 24-13. And James Femedonax, or whatever it's pronounced, it was 43 of 31, 305 yards, 1 touchdown, no interception. But Baltimore's strong safety, Juan Pike, had 12 tackles, which might be the most tackles ever recorded in a game by a safety. A very big win for El Paso, but a very bad loss for Baltimore as they got to go to Pittsburgh next Monday night. But then we get to another important showdown with Miami Sharks going to Birmingham Hornets. Miami trying to go up 5 in a row now to keep up with the Dallas Stars and New Orleans Jazz. But Birmingham wants to keep it up too with their strong defense. But Miami would pull through with a very close victory, 17-13, to make it now 5 in a row victories they had, as Anthony McCormick was 26 of 34 for 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. And Miami's defense had 4 sacks. That was an incredible game. And Birmingham's linebacker Christopher Vela took the lead over Juan Pike for 13 tackles. So that might be the most tackles by anyone in PFA history. But that loss really is going to hurt Birmingham. But a very important victory for Miami as well. Then we get to the game that everybody thought was going to be a snoozer, Cincinnati Colts going to the Boston Destroyers. And it wasn't really a snoozer, but the Boston Destroyers would win 30-17 to make it 3 wins in a row. Cincinnati falls to 1-11. But Cincinnati's Kevin Butcher had a really good day. 8 tackles, 4 pass defended, and 1 interception, so he had a good game. Sucks the rest of the team couldn't keep up. But like I said earlier, Cincinnati is still in it, even at 1-11. But then we got to a very important game. Oklahoma Oilers going to the Buffalo Sabers. A game that both teams needed to win badly. Oklahoma needed to go to 4 in a row, and Buffalo needed to win to end a 2-game losing streak and to finally win at home. But Oklahoma, for the 3rd week in a row, dominated a 37-14 victory, including going up 24-0 at one point. It's the first time Oklahoma was at 500 and the first time Sabres were under 500. Peter Rose had another great game, 24-32, 300 yards and a touchdown. And 3rd straight game with Oklahoma scoring over 30 points. But then we got to a rematch from a few weeks ago. Philadelphia Hawks going to the Indianapolis Express. And Philadelphia crushed Indianapolis 35-7. And believe it or not, 8 sacks in that game, 4 by each. But geez, Leroy Black was unstoppable. 22 of 35, 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks. And with that loss, Indianapolis would be eliminated from the playoffs. But then we got to a very crucial game, Honolulu going to Kansas City, which both teams needed to win to keep up in their respective conference playoffs race. But for the 2nd week in a row, Kansas City absolutely crushed their opponent to win now 4 in a row. They led 24-0 at one point. Their defense had 5 sacks, 4 of them done by 2 players alone. And Henry Settles, their QB, had a 53-yard TD run. Not a bad destruction against the Phantoms there. But then we got to the next game, Washington Americans at Louisville Saints, with Louisville still trying to get their first win in franchise history and avoid going another week winless. But Washington will pull off the barely victory, 20-19, took the lead with just 7 minutes left. And Louisville actually did fought hard, but it wasn't enough. They continued the franchise and league longest losing streak. 7 sacks in the game, and 4 of them by Louisville, so they did get a lot of pressure, and they did lead the entire game. And Louisville's Christopher Gallegos or whatever had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble and recovery. So not a bad job for them, but still could not pull off the victory. And then we go out to MetLife City as the Cleveland Bulldogs went to the Manhattan Greens. Cleveland needs to win to keep up in the National East Division race. But in a stunning upset, Manhattan would beat Cleveland 27-28, took the lead with just a minute and a half left. Jamie Norwood was 16 of 28 for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Greens had a great offensive day despite Cleveland getting 4 sacks on them. And the Greens finally broke their 5-game-long losing streak. Very disappointing loss for Cleveland. Then it was a crucial National Central game. Denver Miners going to the Milwaukee Lakers. Whoever wins will get closer and closer to getting a spot in the National Conference playoffs. And Denver would beat Milwaukee 31-21, including going up 21-0 to start. The Lakers have now lost 4 in a row, and Zachary Ellis continuing his dominant performance in the league. 20 of 34, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. And his receivers had a great day as well. But man, the losses continue to pile up on Milwaukee. Poor play and terrible injuries, it's going to really hurt them from now on, it seems to be. And now we get to another important game. The Chicago 71ers go into the Minneapolis Kitsune. The new arch rivals of the league are going to go at it with the rambunctious Kitsune fans in droves here today, hoping to support their team against this dominant Chicago team. and Minneapolis would pull off the victory 24-22 after starting up 21-3 at one point. The 71ers have now lost 4 in a row, and we had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. How about that? And despite all that impressive performance by the Minneapolis defense, Chicago managed to get 4 sacks. So they both did a pretty good job, and now they split the series between each other. But then we got to another game. The Columbus Barons going to the Pittsburgh Blitz. Pittsburgh needs the wins to keep up with Baltimore, and they would pull it off in a 24-17 victory. And Pittsburgh's backup QB Billy White would get with 23 of 35, 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick, along with the Blitz defense getting 4 sacks. And then we went to Orlando Astros going to the San Antonio Longhorns. San Antonio needs the win to keep up with Birmingham and Atlanta, but they would not get it as Orlando would beat them in an upset 18-14 victory. A very strange score. I don't think we've seen that yet, but there was really no highlights. It was just a massive defensive struggle in this game. A terrible loss for San Antonio, and Orlando would avoid having a losing season for another week. But then we get to the 4 p.m. games. The Oakland Majors going to the Phoenix Storm. Phoenix needs the wins to keep up with both Portland and Los Angeles, but Oakland would win 9-0, continuing their streak of winning against very good teams. 3 of their wins were against teams that have winning records at the moment. 9 sacks in this game in total, and this is the lowest scoring game in PFA history right now. A very bad loss for Phoenix, but a very good moral victory for Oakland. No scoring at all in the second half. Then we go up to Portland, where the Jacksonville Bucks would meet the Portland Dragons, and another important game for the Dragons, needing to win to now tie Phoenix for the lead in the National West. And it wasn't easy, but Portland would pull off the victory after being behind for most of the game, and Bucks blew an 18-point game lead. That is terrible. But the Dragons did win with a final kickoff return for a touchdown to take the lead with just 7 minutes left. Now Portland ties up Phoenix for the National West title. Then we head south to Santa Clara, where it's the Las Vegas Gamblers going to the San Francisco Union. Whoever wins would have second place in the Century West behind the San Diego Rays. And San Francisco would get the 17-7 victory with Larry Babb, their linebacker, getting 7 tackles and 2 sacks. A terrible game for Las Vegas, and that was a very crucial loss too. But now we head down south to Houston, as the Houston Twisters host the Dallas Stars on Sunday night, a matchup between 2 Century South teams. Dallas looking to make up a comeback from that terrible loss against Miami last week, and Houston now winning 2 in a row, looking sharp at the moment to take on the Stars. And in a defensive struggle, Houston would beat Dallas 13-7. It was an incredible game. Dallas did not score until like 4 minutes left into the game, and Twisters defense had 5 sacks and 1 forced fumble, and their running back, Joseph Boylan, was 29 attempts, 155 yards, 1 touchdown with a 71-yard TD run. What an incredible game Houston has had. Now they've won 3 in a row, and Dallas has now lost 2 in a row. Now their 5-game lead against Miami has shrunk now to 3. That's not looking good, especially when your other division rival, New Orleans Jazz, goes to the Tampa Tropics on Monday night with a win to possibly be only 2 games behind you in the Century South. And despite having a losing season and still haven't won a game yet, New Orleans was not favored to win by a lot so far in this game. Tampa really looked like they could possibly pull it off. Tampa fought hard, but in the end, New Orleans would win with 1 minute and 32 seconds left on a 5-yard touchdown run. James Williams was 18 of 26, 239 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. But Tampa's Edward Robinson, running back, was 27 carries, 106 yards, 1 touchdown, and 6 receptions for 170 yards and a touchdown as well. Although Tampa fell again, they really did fight hard, just like they did against Omaha a few weeks ago. And that was the results for Week 13. As now we go take a look at the standings after 13 weeks. As you saw, Omaha did not play this week, so they still remain undefeated for at least another week. And as we look at the National East, Washington now leads Boston by just a half a game. Omaha leads now by 4.5 games now over Milwaukee in the National Central, with Indianapolis, as you can see, now joining Louisville and Tampa as the only teams eliminated from the playoffs. Atlanta still leads Birmingham by 2 in the National South. Phoenix now ties Portland in the National West. And if you don't remember, Phoenix has a tiebreaker because they beat Portland 34-0 a few weeks ago. And now in the Century Conference, Baltimore's lead in the Century East has shrunk because of their loss and Pittsburgh's win. Now they only lead by a game and a half, and they got to go there to Pittsburgh on Monday night. Oh, that's not looking good. And Chicago's lead against Minneapolis shrunk by 2, as they only lead by 2 now in the Century Central. Dallas' lead against New Orleans been cut down to 2 now in the Century South. And San Diego still maintains a 1-game lead over San Francisco in the Century West, along with Columbus getting their first ever losing season. And now we take a look at the playoff stands in the National Conference. Omaha still maintains a lead in the number 1 spot. Phoenix lead in the 2nd spot shrunk a bit. Atlanta and Washington still remain in the 3rd, 4th seed. And same goes for Portland and Los Angeles as the wild card spot. As you see, Indianapolis has been eliminated. And there is one team that could be eliminated next week, and that's Manhattan, if they lose and Los Angeles wins next week. Oh yeah, and Washington wins too. So if Manhattan loses, Washington and Los Angeles wins, Manhattan will be eliminated. And now we get to the Century Conference, where Chicago and Baltimore's lead in the top 2 spots have shrunk, but San Diego now has the lead, the 3rd spot. Dallas fell down to 4 now. Pittsburgh still maintains the 5th spot, and San Francisco wins out the tiebreaker between New Orleans and Minneapolis for the final spot. And now for eliminations, we finally get one here in this conference. Cincinnati will be eliminated if they lose or Pittsburgh wins and San Francisco wins. If either one of them happens, they're eliminated. Columbus will be eliminated too if they lose and San Francisco and Pittsburgh wins. But other than that, everyone else still has a shot to get a playoff spot in the Century Conference. But now we go take a look at the schedule for Week 14. And first up, we're going to have Detroit going to Chicago. And then the winless Tampa Tropics going to San Antonio Longhorns. And then Manhattan going to Cleveland, a rematch from this week. Then it'll be New Orleans going to Houston. And then the winless Louisville Saints going to 1-10 Indianapolis Express. Maybe Louisville will finally get their first victory. But then we got 2 big showings to finish out the 1 p.m. games. The 8-3 3rd seeded San Diego Rays going at the 7-4 Minneapolis Kitsune, who are just in the mix for that last wild card spot in the Century Conference. And then it'll be a showdown between the 3rd and 4th seeds in the National Conference. The Atlanta Trojans going to the Washington Americans. Atlanta beat them a couple weeks ago. Washington's looking to get revenge this week coming up. And then we get to the 4 p.m. games. It'll be Cincinnati going to Buffalo. Jeez, will Buffalo finally get their first home win? And then it'll be a rematch from Monday night, Week 4. Omaha going to Honolulu. Will they stay undefeated? And then Denver going to Jacksonville. Then Birmingham going to Phoenix. And then, oh boy, a big showdown. And not only is it a big showdown in this National West, but whoever wins might have the lead in the National West, depending on how the previous game goes. Los Angeles and their 7-game win streak going to Portland Dragons. I can't wait to see that. Then it'll be the Milwaukee Lakers going to the San Francisco Union. And then finally, El Paso going to Seattle. And then the Sunday night game, like 5 weeks ago, none of us probably wanted to see this. But now it's gotten interesting as the Oklahoma Oilers go to the Kansas City Hammerheads. Oklahoma carries a 5-game win streak and one of the most potent offenses in the league now all of a sudden, going at the Kansas City Hammerhead, who have won 4 in a row now and have a surge in defense all of a sudden. I can't wait to see that. And in a matchup we all were hoping for, I was one of my favorite matchups of the entire season. Baltimore going to Pittsburgh, a reminiscent of the Steelers-Ravens rivalry in the NFL. I can't wait to see that. I didn't think this was going to have any meaning whatsoever before the season, but now it does. Although, if Baltimore does lose, they'll still have the lead in the Century East. If Pittsburgh wins, oh man, that would be so good for them to be just only a game behind Baltimore. And Baltimore still has a lot of tough opponents to go still, and Pittsburgh's main tough opponents are going to be at home. Well, it was a lot of work, but I did manage to cut down the time somewhat, but still a lot too long. Hopefully next time I'll cut the video down the length more. But before I leave, I wanted to show you all something. Here is a preview of PFA's page on my site, Tim Horn's blog. As you can see, this is the result predictions for Week 13, how everyone was projected to possibly win by. Now, when I get after this video is up, I'm going to start working on Week 14's predictions. But if you want to see the predictions for each week as they come up, go here to see the updated predictions as they come out precursing to each week. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week, and I can't wait for Week 14, especially that game Los Angeles at Portland. That's going to be sick, and I most certainly can't wait for my favorite game for the entire year, Baltimore going to Pittsburgh on Monday night. So see you soon with Week 14 action. Zane!